When I ordained as a priest 24 years ago, just over, I had no idea what I was doing. And I mean that literally. I didn't know anything about this path. And when people would ask me at the time, why are you doing this? I had a kind of set answer I would give, which was that I wanted Zazen to be at the center of my life. At that point, I'd been sitting for probably about 10 years, mostly on my own. And I don't think I even knew what Zazen was. But in many ways, I felt the same way about it then that I do now, which was that there was something honest about it. There was something about this act of choosing to sit down and to be still and to breathe that felt much bigger than its parts. I didn't know what to do with that. And I also didn't know how to make it fit into my life. I was always, as many of us do, I think I got the idea in my head that I was supposed to sit every day. And so I would try to sit every day. And sometimes I could do that for a while. And when I would do that for a while, I would feel very proud of myself because I was accomplishing the goal. And then sometimes it would slip away or something would get in the way for a day or a week. And and then I would feel like I was failing. And I would play games with myself about when I was going to start again, or maybe, you know, I would sit down for just a couple minutes, literally just a couple, so that I could check the box and say I sat today. And that relationship to it didn't feel good. It didn't feel mature. It didn't feel like I knew what I was doing. And it didn't feel sustainable. No one was encouraging me to do it. No one wanted me to sit in that way. And so everything on earth got in the way of it. And so this thing that felt so important and felt so honest also felt a little bit far away. It felt like I was always making it secondary. So when the conversation with my teacher turned to ordination, all I knew was surely, surely if I ordain, if I wear robes, no one will question that this is what I'm supposed to do. Who can push back? I have the ultimate excuse. So I took part in that ceremony and I shaved my head and I put on robes. And eventually I found my way to the monastery, to Zuyoji, where, and I've told this story before, you stand outside and you wait and you wait and you wait. And eventually someone comes and they're very harsh, they're very stern, and they say, "Why are you here?" And you might say all sorts of nonsense, but I had been coached that I was supposed to say, for shugyo. And shugyo is the training, it's the practice. I'm here for shugyo. And then the same person who is standing there being so stern to say, "What is shugyo?" And then you say something, you try. It's the it's the way that was handed down by Dogen. It's the practice of Buddhas and ancestors. and they say, think about it more. And they walk away. And they might come back in 2 or 3 hours. This is February. It was very cold. And they ask again. And try again. The correct answer, or at least at Zuyoji, was, I don't know. And when I got to I don't know, it was such an honest answer because I actually had no idea what I had signed up to do. And I still, in that moment, if someone had come up to me with a microphone and said, why are you here? I would have said, I don't know. My teacher said I should do this. He said this was part of the deal. If I ordain, I have to come here. I don't know what comes next. It's Tuesday, and on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, we're going to do these big ceremonies. And I'm aware that if that same person with the same microphone were to come up to me today and said, why are you doing that? I also still would not have a good answer. Not a satisfying answer. Not to the why. But I have learned a lot about what it is that I want from this. The way that I understand what I'm doing, even if I don't know why. There was a moment, I lived in Kumamoto before I ordained, and this was a couple of years before ordination. I had not yet met my teacher. That conversation had never happened. And there's a street, there's a kind of old hill in Kumamoto with a lot of temples. They line both sides. And I remember so clearly walking up these stairs and looking to the temples to the right and the temples to the left. And on one of the temples to the right, there was a priest who at the time I thought was an old man, but was probably my age now. And he was wearing the samoe, the work clothes, and he was just sweeping. And I felt swept up by this feeling watching him, not a religious feeling, nothing about his spiritual vocation. I remember watching him sweep and thinking, that looks like the best job. And I voiced this to my girlfriend at the time, who was not impressed. That was not a very ambitious thing to say. And at the time, I couldn't articulate it, not in a satisfying way. But what I came to understand about that moment and about many moments since was that I saw him taking care of something. That was his whole job, was to take care of something for a while. And that struck me as so beautiful. And I still feel the same way today. Ejo McMullen spoke a couple weeks ago, and he talked about the hojo, which is this room. It's the room that the abbot inhabits. Not only inhabits, but the room that the abbot, in a sense, is. It's 10 feet by 10 feet. And I don't remember exactly what he said, but the image that I walked away with that night was of a room where none of the walls are held together in any real way, and a community standing outside of those walls, holding the walls up from the outside, and an abbot on the inside holding them up like this. Where if the community isn't there and they aren't holding up those walls, there is no room, it just falls. And if the abbot leaves, it kind of collapses. And so you have all these people, and they all have the same job. They're standing in different places, but they're holding up these walls. They're holding up a container. And that container is the thing that we take care of. When I left Zuyoji and I progressed through these steps that we have on the path, Dharma combat ceremony for me when I was the Shuso was 20 years ago. And then there was transmission. And somewhere in that period, a conversation arose about me moving to Alaska to work with the Anchorage Zen community. And I remember something that was so stressful at the time was that in a lot of that correspondence with this community that I had never really met, people use different language, but a lot of people use the word teacher. They kept saying, we want you to come and be our teacher. We need a teacher. Come and teach. And, and that felt so big. I hadn't thought of myself as a teacher. I had been exposed, of course, by that time to all sorts of priests, some of whom absolutely saw themselves as teachers, some in a very kind of gentle way, and some who had read a lot of books about Zen, and they were trying to be a Zen teacher. Really unpredictable, really harsh, a little bit scary. So I knew what it could look like to be a teacher, but I had not been taught to be a teacher. I had been taught to be a priest. I had been taught to be a custodian. When you live in a monastery, what you do is you clean the monastery and you feed the people in the monastery. And then you do these services, these practices that are intended kind of in this way of holding up the walls from the inside, that are intended to kind of keep the place spiritually alive. There's this thread that you keep pulling every day. And that's it. That's all you do. And when people come to the monastery, you invite them to come and join you. You don't teach them. There's no curriculum. You just say, come in. And then they help you clean the floor. And they help you chant. And they help you hold up those walls. So when this invitation came to be a teacher, I remember I took it very seriously. And for the first little while, whenever I would give a talk, I was very conscious, and I had these conversations with Tracy at the time. It's like, what do I say first? In my first talk, what do I say? Because I'm laying the ground, apparently, for a curriculum, for a path of study. What am I going to say in the second talk? What am I going to say in the third? And I would write out these long outlines. And I would give these long talks, too long. But after a while, it became clear I'm not there to be a teacher. I'm not a teacher. I'm still not. I'm a custodian. Teaching is one of the ways that I invite people to come and hold up those walls. That's not the only way. It may not even be the best way. It's just part of the schedule. What I have found over the years is that in many ways my instincts at the beginning were very good. Partly around this notion of taking care of something. I was right. I love that. That's the work I want to do. And partly around this idea that if I took up this path in a particular way, I would have an excuse to continue to take up this path in a particular way. It's not easy to start a community, for example, but when you're dressed like me, it's a little bit easier. So I can put up a poster and I can open the door and I can say, come, and people come. Not a lot, but a few. I have the privilege of being held up, not just by this community, but by other communities and by everyone I meet. Everyone who sees me in a particular way is holding me accountable in a particular way. That's a gift. What I want for all of you is also to be supported by each other in this. I try to hold these walls. But the real work is the work that everyone does together to hold the walls from the other side. We can do this practice alone. I've had long stretches in my life where I did this practice alone in my bedroom, in the corner. And I'm glad I did. But there's a critical element that's missing. We use this, there's a fondness I find in Zen for talking about boiled potatoes. This image of potatoes boiling in a pot. And when you stir them, they all rub against each other. And as they rub against each other, their skins come off. Just naturally. They just kind of slide away. Now that's what we do in community. We remove that skin, we become vulnerable and we become soft. We become the soup. And when I have sat alone, what I have found is that though there is this connection to this thing that feels very honest and feels very important, actually the skin grows. It starts to feel removed. It starts to feel like something that just I do. Everyone else is over there while I do this special thing. when we come together, we support each other, we practice together, we all serve as custodians of the practice. This is how I understand what we call the three wheels: giver, receiver, gift. It's not just that they function simultaneously, it's that they're all the same thing, because you can't have one without the other. You can't have a giver without a receiver. And with no gift, it makes no sense. And when it functions simultaneously in this practice, there is the act of giving, there's the act of offering. But what you're offering is you. And in doing so, you receive so much. The image for me is of walking on a path where you don't know if the ground will be beneath your feet in the next step, but that the step itself generates the ground. So much work has gone into what's going to happen this weekend. If you're not on the board, it's probably difficult for you to imagine, but it's been a year of looking at logistics, of thinking about contingencies, of saying, what if this happens, or this happens, or this happens, or this happens? Even today, even yesterday, it's dealing with someone or something from the outside saying, you know what, I think we should do it this way instead. And then everything changes. It's arranging food and people and drivers and tents. It's making possible this thing that in the end is just all of us getting together and taking care of something. Trying to keep it safe, trying to keep it clean, trying to make it ready for whoever comes next. It's playing host when we could play guest. So I want to take this moment just to say thank you. It's inspiring to me to see the community come together. It's inspiring to me and familiar to see us come together around something that by definition we won't really understand until we're on the other side. I was thinking today how so much of, we talk about spiritual confidence and we talk about the Dharma gate of ease and joy. But the fact is that so much of the taste of Zen practice, the actual taste of Zen practice, is something like imposter syndrome. It's sitting as Buddha, it's sitting as Bodhisattva. It's taking up that practice and all the other practices and thinking, do we know what we're doing? Are we qualified? Am I even qualified to say the things that are coming out of my mouth, that I'm going to free all beings and put an end to delusion? Am I qualified in a few days to put on these really fancy robes and do these really fancy things? I don't think the yes or no is important. The leap is important. The faith is important. And it's looking to your right and looking to your left and seeing that you're not alone, which is what I'm doing. And that's where I'll stop.